Welcome back to MCOC AlBundyRules. I got the Odin, current Odin, after rebalance, retweak, buff, whatever you want to call it. I got the tutorial on him. Some highlights are starting off before the tutorial. So this is from the update, how Odin is after the May 2021 update that just occurred. And we're looking at some massive damage. And I was a big fan of him even before this rebalance, tweak, buff, whatever you want to call it, as I had shown in my original tutorial of him. But I kind of considered him like an Apocalypse 2, to where his synergies were so good, his ability was initially overlooked. But when they had to tweak his synergies a bit, they buffed up his attack too. So he's great. So we're looking at some major attack and some utility there. But let's start the tutorial now. Odin's sleep has changed massively. He automatically starts with the Fury and the armor up every fight. Now, however, Odin's sleep, if it's his first fight of the quest, or if he is in between fights, he gets that aptitude. So that is a major change. So he can get an aptitude now. If you rotate him in fights, he keeps the aptitude, but he is not contingent on it. And he gets that Fury and armor up regardless of that. So that was a nice change that really gave him some bumps in his attack ability. Like I said, aptitude is not going to make or break him if you use him to clear the entire path, but it is nice. So the always active now, this was the main change. The Fury buff and the armor up are always active now, not just when it's Odin sleep is there. And when you're close, something that's really good with him too, because you might look at time frames on these buffs, and he's very dependent on keeping his buffs going. But when you stay close, when you fight aggressive, you pause. So watch the timers on the buffs that do have timers. Every time I get close, the timer stops. If I knock them down, if it's something that I had took from them, which I'll explain that later, I can reset the timer as well. Looking at Odin Force, when either Odin or his opponent are knocked down, you gain the Odin Force charge. Really, I like to keep 2 at all times. Anytime, personally speaking, I don't have 2, I make myself sure I have 2. That way I'm ready for the next Odin Force attack. Odin Force attacks are really those that knock down the defender, which include the heavy, the S1, S2, and S3. The reason why it's important to have 2 of those two of those Odin Force charges up and it's Odin Force ready before you do those attacks, you get a major extra benefit. Here for the heavy, if the Odin Force is active, meaning 2 of those active, you get the energized buff for each of Odin's unique buffs, increasing combat power rate. So if you got a lot of buffs, you increase his power rate even more so than you normally would on just the heavy attack itself. So nice little boost there. More buffs you do that, the more power rate you can get on there. That is also helpful for the special one, because on Odin Force you gain a Bulwark buff, which increases block proficiency by 700. And although the Bulwark block proficiency itself might not be great, it is an extra buff. Extra buffs are good because that can increase our total damage potential. So that is a good thing. Plus the True Strike, even if you don't need True Strike, it can be very helpful in fights like this, you know, your Modocs, your Nightcrawlers, stuff like that. But it also gives you another buff. And I'm going to speak about these buffs, but the more buffs, the better. Okay, the more buffs we have, the better we can get the special 2 damage, as we see here. The last hit deals direct damage based on unique buffs, so the more unique buffs we have, the more damage we can do. And on activation of Odin Force, refresh the durations of all personal buffs on Odin. So staying aggressive, staying close to them, you're able to pause the timers, and with S2 you're able to reset them. We're also looking at S3, so it's really easy to keep buffs up on Odin on most fights. For S3, you gain a copy of all personal buffs he has gained. So you get a copy, meaning an extra one right there. You gain an extended buff, increasing the duration of all future buffs by 25% for 15 seconds, max 1 stack if Odin Force is up. So new future buffs that come up, you're going to extend the time on them for what you get. Pre-fight ability, this is something that made him very popular. And we'll see that first one, that aptitude buff, and that can carry on over. You activate it, the next champ that goes in other than Odin gets to carry it on for the rest of the quest. Very good with someone like Hela. His synergy with Hela is really, really good. I think one of the main reasons he got the rebalance, so to speak. You see the protection buff, preventing loss of more than 18% health, which is really good there. And then Stormbreaker, really good for those shock nodes and fights. Shock resistant buff, increasing shock resistance by 80%. So those are very nice ones. I tend to enjoy the attack relevant ones. I think a lot of people would agree with me there. Of course, the other ones can be very helpful. Throw the Thread Struck right there. An aptitude. give you some extra batch, and you mix that up with somebody like Hel and her synergy with him and her furies. Oh, it's crazy. Here's some synergy bonuses. So Odin, each living member 5% attack. Here we can get the others, the Thor, Hela, Loki, and Angela can get some buffs right there. Or Sworn, Odin, once per 5 times all will intercede and can give you perfect block. Perfect block for 100% for 10 seconds can be very nice. Keep in mind it can also increase your S2 potential. Here with the Hela 10% attack rating when fighting the final node of a quest, and of course it does an amazing one with Hela there. Then you see the critical rating and friends one's nothing great, but this is a good one with MCOC. It gives Odin when dealing a burst of direct damage using special 2. The damage threshold of each burst is increased by 150% of Odin's base attack rating. So you really want to get Odin's attack up, use that MCOC synergy. Very nice. Here's signature ability. Basic clouds, the same fury buffs, armor up, physical buffs, energy buffs, resistance buffs. You can pretty much get them from your opponent. So max 1 stack, so you can't keep stacking them, but somebody even like a Rhino there, I can go ahead and take his Fury as we see, and each time I take it, I reset it. Someone like Venom who has a bunch of buffs, I'm not stealing them, I'm taking them. So I'm getting a copy of them for myself. So you see I got a copy of all of the buffs he had active that I'm able to take, and each time I knock him down, I am able to go ahead and refresh them. So look and tip when use heavies to build up to 2 Odin Force charge to maximize heavies and special. So I always want to keep 2 up there personally. The good thing about this, when you use that, it's always on a knockdown. So it doesn't go from 2 to 0, it always goes from 2 to 1, because once you knock them down, you automatically gain 1. So even though it technically takes 2 to use the Odin Force attack, you gain 1 by knocking them down, so it goes back up to 1 as we saw right there. You always want to use to gain that extra great benefits by maximizing the Odin Force. A lot of things you can gain from that. If nothing else, you can increase your buffs, which is going to increase your S2 damage. So I highly discourage ever using special attacks without the 2 Odin Force active. Tip 2, get as many unique buffs as possible before using the S2. So I'm going to talk about a rotation on the next tip. However, the more buffs you have before you launch the S2, the more damage you're going to do. And there's a lot of ways to do it between heavies, S1, S2, S3, Odin Sleep. You can get buffs from the Defender. Lots of ways to get your buffs. The more unique buffs you have, the more damage you're going to do, okay? Stay close to the Defender to pause the buff timers. You want to pause those buff timers. And now tip 3. So the rotation I like. It's going to look more complicated at first, but I'm going to break it down. It's going to be S3 heavy, 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 S1 heavy, S2. So that might look like a lot. It's really not that much. The reason why there's so many heavies in there, you have to redo a heavy every time you knock them down. This rotation is not as complicated as it might initially look. It's just you want to have the Odin Force before each knockdown. So anytime you knock him down, it's going to go down from 2 to 1. So I have to do another heavy to get the Odin Force. So before I get into this, I got to get it back up to 2. So before I do the initial S3, I need to have 2 Odin Force. Then I do the S3. It's going to bring me down to 1. I do a heavy to get back up to S2. I do another heavy to get that charge. It's going to bring me back down to 1. So then I'm going to have to do another heavy to get back up to 2. Once you get used to it, it's very simple. And then you see back down 1. Now I'm going to have to do another one to get the heavy. And if you do the heavy, 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 or heavy S1 heavy, either way is fine. But now once I have that there, and I have all those buffs, I do my S2, and look at this damage right there. All right, so very good. Practice that rotation. Like I said, rotation's really S3 heavy, S1, S2, but just make sure you have the heavies in between to ensure that the Odin Force is always active. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to click that top left button and subscribe. Be sure to click on my playlist for other videos I have for tutorials and others. MCOC AlBundyRules.